Singularity.
My name is Nicola, aka Socrates, and you're watching Singularity One-on-One. Singularity One-on-One is a regular podcast feature of Singularity Weblog, where you can go and listen to it or download it in full. If you guys enjoy the show, you can help me make it better in several ways. You can write a brief review on iTunes, you can leave a comment on YouTube, or you can simply make a donation. As always, I will be the man with the questions, and today, the guest with the answers will be no one else but Robert Scoble. Robert doesn't really need an introduction, but just in case, for some people who may be completely offline, I would say that he's the liaison officer for Rackspace. He's a social media phenomenon. He's a technology pundit with a huge following. He's also a journalist who has done thousands of interviews at the very bleeding edge of technology. And according to his own words, he is someone who always tries to have the front row seat on tech.
Thank
you. Without further ado, Robert, thanks very much for being with us today.
Although you're my new competition, you're kicking butt with these interviews.
Thanks very much. I hope I really kick butt soon. At least get to a fraction of the place where you're at right now.
Well, you got Thad Starner, and that was a really impressive. In fact, my Google Glasses downstairs charging up. So.
Thanks. And by the way, for those who don't know, that's how kind of me and Robert connected. He really enjoyed and posted on his social network my interview with Thad Starner. So for those who may have missed it, go check it out. It's a fantastic interview, according to no one else but Robert. And I have to agree, I concur entirely with that. But let's get back on topic here. Robert, if you were to introduce yourself in a couple of sentences, how would you do it?
I like new things. I grew up in Cupertino, a mile from Apple Computer, and got a Apple II when I was in junior high. And, my dad got an Apple II, and our school bought some Apple IIs, and that just got me in. I knew my future had changed when we unboxed that. And, I've always been into new things ever since that, back in 1977. And, my dad was an engineer in the Silicon Valley, so I got to see a lot of Silicon Valley come through the house. And that got me interested in computers and technology. I never took to programming. I tried. My dad wanted me to be an engineer too, or something scientific. And I tried. I got through 2 years of calculus in college, and then the 89 earthquake hit, and I was in physics class, and I said, man, that's a big story. And I realized I liked journalism a lot more than trying to do math and science and learn how to program. The rest is all on Wikipedia. I mean, I met Steve Wozniak. I learned how to set up a bunch of Macs because the world was just switching at that time from mini computers to these Macintosh-based computers for journalism. In fact, during the 89 earthquake, the San Francisco Chronicle published on the steps of somebody's house with a Macintosh, with a really old Macintosh now, and a laser printer. And if it wasn't for that, the paper wouldn't have gotten published because all the presses were down. Mm-hmm. Or all the typesetting machines, were down. And I got to San Jose State, the same thing happened. That's where I got my name Scobleizer, because I set up OS 7 beta on everybody's machines, because I ran the journalism's Macintosh network and with Steve Sloan. And one of the employees says, "Help! I can't use my computer. I've been Scobleized." And I was like, "Oh, it's sort of funny." I mean, last night we got new YouTube app on our iPads, and my son had almost the same expressions, like, "What's this? I can't use this anymore." Everything's changed on it, And that got me into a computer programming magazine, which got me into the Microsoft ecosystem. And, I was at the first NT developers conference, and switched from Macs to Windows NT at that time. And that got me into tablet PCs and all sorts of fun stuff, and got me into blogging later because we ran ComSys and two of our speakers got me into blogging. And blogging then just took my career and made me a name and give me an audience, which was pretty hard to do before that. So.
So you gave us sort of the short story. And by the way, as a side note, I've been trying to get Steve Wozniak myself for an interview on this show. I was lucky enough to meet him twice when I was at Singularity University, and he did promise to give me an interview. The problem is that after Jobs, because we were shooting at about the time that, Steve Jobs unfortunately passed away. And after that, he got swamped and now like the big fish came into the pond, and I'm still struggling to try and get him.
You'll get him. He's a nice guy. And I talked him out of 40 grand for our journalism department. And I studied every morning with him and, really got to know some of the Apple stories and got to know him. And he's just one of my favorite people in the world. So,
same here. I love the guy. And
the problem is the stories haven't changed because he hasn't really done all that much since the 1980s in terms of technology. I mean, he keeps playing around with it, and if you scratch him, you'll discover his passion for cell phones. I mean, I remember one time he went into a store and bought like 200 cell phones.
Oh wow.
Cause he built scanners to follow people around. Remember before everything turned digital and encrypted, you could listen to people's cell phone conversations. And if you had a scanner, you could follow them from cell to cell. And he has recordings of people saying the craziest stuff on their cell phone. Talk about privacy. There was no privacy back then.
Now, you kind of gave us the short story of your life and how you got to be where you are today, but can you tell us what is it in the world that you're doing right now? What does this mean to be Chief Liaison Officer? And because from where I'm standing, you gotta have the coolest job in the world. And I'm thinking
it's one of them. I know a few people who have, I think, like I know Jim Long is a camera guy for NBC in the White House, and every time we get together and start drinking, he tells me all these crazy stories of being on Air Force One. You can't even blog these stories, being in Kandahar with the president, But yeah, it's pretty hard to beat my job.
Yeah. So how is it? What is it that you do anyway? And how is it that someone gets to have a cool job like that?
It might be more fun to be like Bill Gates or Larry Ellison. I don't know. They have their own hells that they've created. I just have always interviewed. Going back to Steve Wozniak in '89 when I stalked him, right? I kept seeing his car on our college campus, and it was always in the same spot. So he made it easy, and I just kept waking up earlier and earlier until the car wasn't there, and I waited for him to show up. And he gave me an interview, and then I eventually got the nerve up to ask him for an old Mac, and he said, "Oh, you need a whole lab." And I always give money to the schools I'm going to. He was studying Spanish at our community college, which was fun. So where were we going with that?
What is it that you do?
What do I do? Rackspace just asked me, go and find the future and interview them. That's all they really, they want to know. Well, it's deeper than that. For Rackspace, I do, these interviews. So I go around and do what you're doing. I go and interview tech executives, innovators, geeks. Like last weekend, I was hanging out with the Google Glass hackathon, right? And I'll be at another one, and there's a Sears hack. So I build relationships for Rackspace. I find out, if your company's on Amazon or Microsoft or something like that, I find out why, and that turns into email internally to the strategist saying, hey, the other guys are still beating us here, and you better fix that. Some of it's,
you're like a strategic spook, like for Rackspace.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. A big part of it is actually what Red Bull is doing. So Red Bull is a great product to talk about because the product is hold on. The product sucks, right? So Red Bull is sugar water with caffeine and a few other things in it. It's really not you can't talk about the product and sell $2 billion a year of that, right? So they don't try. You've never seen an ad where they talk about the ingredients or what's in the product.
They talk about pushing the boundaries.
Right. And how do they do that? They apply their brand to gods in our society. So people who jump out of spaceships, people who surf big waves, people who race cars, even geeky gods, they'll put their brand on, right? The guy who owned MySpace had a cooler in his house. They brought a cooler to his house because they wanted to build that brand association between gods in our society and their brand. In fact, if you work at Red Bull, you're not allowed to wear the logo on your clothing unless you're a god, unless you've been chosen as one of these gods that we want the brand to be on.
Wow.
And yeah, it's very, very deliberate, right? It's hacking your brain. And this is marketing, 404. It's really advanced marketing. And that's part of what I do is I go around and I interview the guy who started Instagram or the guy who started Box.net or the lady who started Wildfire Interactive, and, make sure that Rackspace is associated somehow with that very subtly because, you don't need to be frontal about it, but, there's lots of logos around here that have Rackspace on them, right?
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this though. That's sort of the Rackspace end of things, but from your own point of view, is there sort of like a overarching motivation or a goal that looking backwards kind of spans for the past 20 or 30 years since that phenomenal meeting with Steve Jobs, which literally changed your life?
It goes back before that. I mean, getting new cameras in high school. I worked in a consumer electronics store and I always loved new things. When the Minolta Maxim autofocus came out, that it was the first first SLR with autofocus. I sold our entire shipment I sold in like 2 hours,
Wow.
Because I was so excited about it. It was like, this is a new thing and it's fun and it's different and it does stuff that even a professional photographer couldn't do. And in fact, we had arguments about that. And it's funny how people resist new ideas, new technologies, because the pros would say, I can focus faster or not. I go, really? Even back then when it was slow, autofocus would go and stop right on the image. And I was like, I've watched a lot of pros. They do a lot of tricks to focus where they want. Yeah. They'll focus on the ground and wait till the runner gets there and then shoot a frame. All sorts of tricks to do focus. I was like, autofocus is going to kick your butt. And sure enough, now every pro uses autofocus, right? And in fact, the really innovative ones, I went to school with Brad Mangian, and he's now one of the best sports photographers in the world. He bought one of the first Canon EOS 300 f2.8 lenses. He put it on his credit card in college. And all the college kids were like, dude, that is crazy putting a $10,000 lens on your credit cards. What are you doing? But now he's the best sports photographer in the world, right? Yeah. And he saw the advantage of using new technology to do something new. And that's what I've always been intrigued by. And it just is my life. I'd do it if I didn't get paid.
Is it curiosity or is it like the desire to have fun? Because it looks like you're having tons of fun. That's why we're all so jealous.
Yeah, it's both, right? It's where I like to know where the future's going. And I like to be one of those guys who doesn't resist technology, doesn't argue with people about is Google Glass going to be popular or not. There's plenty of people who are, right? In fact, last night, Mike Arrington and I were having this argument. He's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And, he's resisting. And it's like, I never want to be a resistor of new technology. Never. If I do, then I feel old, because that's what older people did in my life, most of them.
Well, I'm going to come back to that topic of resisting new technology and embracing it and the risks of sort of early adopters. But before that, let me just ask you.
Yeah, the risk today is you look like a dork, right? And I'm okay with that. And that's people nuts too, right?
Sure, and there are benefits to being a geek. I mean, some people find that interesting. You know, it may work with certain kind of people to become friends, to get hooked up with girls or whatever, right? It's cool nowadays, kind of.
By the way, it's really interesting talking about girls. At the Google Glass hackathons, it was almost 40% women, or more, almost half women at the hackathon. And that's a huge change.
That's fantastic.
And I found that very fascinating because everybody thinks there's a fashion cost that these things look dorky on your face, but they are attracting women as programmers because they understand this is going to be a future that they can get excited about. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned you're someone who's interested in where the future is going. So in the context of Google Glass, is that where the future is going? How revolutionary change is that?
I think it's a big deal. I feel like I have the same feelings about Google Glass that I had about the Apple II. I think it's a new product category that's going to take 30 years to really play out, or 20 years. And, right now it has no software. It's expensive. The Apple II was expensive. It had no software. It wasn't very fast. It didn't even come with a screen. It was, Woz's big breakthrough was he designed it to use a television screen, and, or one of his big breakthroughs. I mean, he had many breakthroughs on that product, but, I feel like that it's a breakthrough. It's, in your interview, Tad said it's, having a Cray 1 on your face.
Yeah.
Which
supercomputer.
Well, when I was in high school, I remember Apple buying that Cray 1. It cost more than $1 million and it took an entire room, and now it's 49 grams on your face. I think, and I'm seeing the kinds of apps that developers are thinking about and working on, and it's like, oh yeah, this is quite different than a cell phone. It's a full-on sensor platform that's, letting you do all sorts of crazy stuff, flying drones with your head and all sorts of fun stuff that I don't think is important today. And it's hard to tell that it's going to be mass market, but I've seen this happen over and over again in my career where, something really pushes forward and everybody resists it, or a lot of people resist it. And sure enough, it turns out to be really important. This is one I'm going to live every day with,
So let me ask you this.
In fact, I'm missing it during the interview right now. I can tell it's loud on my face.
Yeah, it's funny how technology becomes a part of us very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Now, for those of us who haven't had the chance to yet use it personally, what would be some of your favorite applications or, benefits of the device?
I mean, I would buy it just for the camera. I'm getting pictures of my kids that I never got before. It takes less than 1 second to take an image with it, where on my, even on a Samsung or an iPhone, it takes 3 to 5 seconds, at minimum. And sometimes getting it out of your pocket takes 3 to 5 seconds, and then it takes another 3 to 5 seconds to find the button and wait for the image to show up and take the image. And by that time, the kids have stopped doing the cute thing that they were doing. So that's the killer app, number one. But I don't think that's the promise of this thing. The promise of this thing is it's the first consumer electronics device that knows where you're aimed. So it knows, where you're aimed, and it's really good at that. And there hasn't been any apps that really have exploited that yet, right? And it knows where you're looking. So there's a 16 by 16 eye sensor that's watching your pupil move around and can probably even tell if you're excited because your eye opens up when you're excited, or, it can watch if you're sleepy or if you're winking, all sorts of fun stuff. So think about driving with it. It could tell that you're falling asleep and warn you. All sorts of fun stuff.
All sorts of fun stuff. But for example, just a couple of days ago, one of the things that really freaked out some people online was a patent filed by Google about sort of watching your gaze and estimating which ads work and which ads don't work and where they should be placed so that you get to see them more and more. So how about that business model with ads?
I think it goes a lot deeper than that. I think Google is building a contextual OS, an operating system that knows your context. And what do I mean by that? Already they have an API that knows whether you're walking, running, biking, or driving. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's 4 contexts. Next year it'll be 8, and the year after it'll be 16, and the year after it'll be 32. And so think about, can you figure out somebody's shopping by watching them walk around? Of course you can, because if you're first of all, you're in a shopping mall. That means you're shopping. You've crossed the geofence into the mall. Second of all, this thing knows where you're aiming. So if you're running through the mall, first of all, it knows that you're running. And so it can say, okay, he's running. He's not shopping. Mm-hmm. But shoppers, walk through the mall and all of a sudden they turn and look at a store. Their intent changed. Their gaze changed.
Window shopping.
Window shopping, right? If you're at Macy's in New York, you're looking at the windows. You're not walking down the street going past it, right? And so it can know right there. It can switch. Oh, you're in a shopping context. And then it can say, then it can fire the camera, take a picture of that store window, and then watch where you look. And if it knows anything about that window, if it knows, there's a trumpet in the upper right, and there's a drum in the upper left, and there's a guitar in the middle, and there's a saxophone in the middle left. If you look at the trumpet, it knows, it can put that in the database. Oh, this guy's thinking about a trumpet for some reason. And maybe he has, and then it would match up with other contexts. Do you have a kid? Oh, is their birthday next week? It could start making some assumptions about why you're shopping, and it can even ask you,
But those assumptions are a double-edged sword, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. You could have false positives, but you could ask the user. You could say, hey, we noticed you were interested in that trumpet. Are you, would you like to see other models? Would you like to know other stores nearby? Would you, cause it can try to guess what your intent is, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And certainly Google is watching everything, right? So if you go to, Google and you type trumpet, all of a sudden it knows you're really strongly attached to trumpet. And if you start looking for music stores, or if you ask Google Glass, okay, Glass, where's the closest music store? All of a sudden it knows your intent is really strong on music and trumpets, right? And then you're going to start showing it some brand names and watch your behavior. And it'll know, by the way, it'll know your economic circumstances, right? So if you're a billionaire, it's going to show you a different kind of trumpet than if you're Robert Scoble. My friends who are poor who aren't as well off, it'll show them a far different trumpet. So it'll put you in a different category. If you're part of a band, it'll know a lot more, or it might look at, if it knows what you're buying it for, then if it's for yourself, it'll watch your Spotify behavior, right? Mm-hmm. So it'll know, oh, you're into this kind of music, you're into jazz music, you should look at these trumpets because these are more appropriate for jazz than classical,
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Google always watching, let me read to you something and you tell me what you think and how relevant or truthful that is. Yeah. It's a quote which goes like this: always eyes watching you, asleep or awake, indoors or out of doors, in the bath or bed, no escape. Nothing was your own except the few cubic centimeters in your skull.
Yeah. I'm wearing a new kind of sleep monitor that, by the way, the pilots who fly the president wear this. It's not yet publicly available, but yeah, I wear it to bed. I wear it when I'm having sex. I wear it in the shower. I wear it. I was told never take this off for at least a week and we'll figure out your sleep pattern, right? And it'll even warn me when I've reached 70% on this. It's the same as having 2 glasses of alcohol. So it's the same as being drunk, basically. Mm-hmm. And so, and if you continue working, your mistake rate goes way up. So And they've studied this. They put this on minors. They put this on people who fly the president around because they know if you hit 70%, you're flying the president while drunk. It's the same as flying him as if you had two shots of whiskey right before you flew the president. They're not going to let you do that, right?
So are we living in that world that I described now with that quote?
Yeah. It's funny. My book ends up where, in 25 years, we're going to go to the Ritz and we're going to go into an escape room where there's, where it's going to turn off all of our digital devices.
In a Faraday cage or something.
Faraday cage, and it's going to turn off all the devices and everything's going to unhook from our nerves and, and we're going to be able to be ourselves again, right?
But now let me ask you this though, because that paragraph that I read to you was from George Orwell's book 1984.
Yep, I know it.
So does that change anything? And did we fail to heed his warning?
Yes, but we're not going to. We're not going to heed his warning. We're not going to turn off the NSA. We're, we like security. We don't like things flying into our biggest skyscrapers. We don't like Timothy McVeigh bombing our buildings. If you went and bought a ton of diesel fuel right now, or 250 gallons of diesel fuel and a ton of fertilizer, I guarantee you somebody's going to come looking at what you're doing. All right?
Yeah, but if I Google, say,
but that happened,
and a rice cooker or a slow cooker,
they will come and check you out. Absolutely.
Now, does that make any sense?
Yes, it does.
I'm not sure.
Yes,
sure. Or, for example, just whatever happened yesterday.
It certainly does if you have other markers that mark you as somebody who is a risk to society. Everybody gets rated this way. If you went to the White House, they ask you to wait outside for a couple hours. Why? Because they're doing a security check on you to make sure you're not a threat, And if you want to get into the White House, you better be a good citizen and not be mouthing off on Facebook, right?
Sure, okay. For the White House, I agree. Or if you're going to even, let's say, a courtroom or a courthouse, of course, you're going to go through a metal detector.
That's the difference.
But if you're in your own home and if you're searching on your own computer...
If you're getting together with other people who have done harm to our society and then you do that, I'm sorry, expect a knock on the door. That's part of living in the society today.
But that idea about harm is what worries me, because just yesterday, the British government used the terrorism legislation to hold a Brazilian citizen on Heathrow Airport, who was basically the partner of the Guardian journalist who broke the Snowden story. And
I think
they claimed that he was a terrorist, basically.
Well, that's over the line. And this is the problem. We've created a surveillance society that can be used for a lot of good. I think everybody agrees that we'd like to stop, 9/11 from happening again, or the Boston bombers. We caught them pretty quickly because of IT investments. Not necessarily, we didn't prevent them, but we caught them within a week because we had pictures. Citizens had pictures. Security cameras had pictures, and we had Israeli software that let the government go through those pictures in an extremely fast fashion and find the few people that they wanted to look at deeper. That, I think everybody agrees that's pretty good. It's hard to make an argument that we shouldn't do any of that, right? But
I agree. I agree with you.
My great grandfather was arrested in Germany for speaking out against the Nazis. I know, and my wife is Iranian, and she has friends with whip marks on their back that they got just for hanging out with a girl in a car. I understand when governments go over the line, and it's a hard thing. It's a slippery slope, and that's the cautionary tale, is how do we put checks and balances? How do we keep people from using their power against other people in an inappropriate way? That's an interesting conversation to me that I like talking about, because it's clear we're not going to turn off all the security cameras. We're not going to turn off the NSA taps onto the fiber optic lines. We're not going to, we're not going to stop doing surveillance.
So you think we are going to continue living in a world where, according to the news today, 75% of the traffic is actually scanned by the NSA?
Yeah, I don't see us going back from that. I just don't. The world politically would have to radically change, and average citizens in the street would have to change their voting behavior. And I know they are not. So we are not going to turn off those taps, and that's going to be part of our life for the rest.
I have to say, I really hope you're wrong on that one.
Well,
you may be right.
Do you see anybody doing Million Man marches on Washington D.C. because of this stuff? I don't.
Well,
do you see anybody changing their voting behavior? Do you see the polls changing that much? I don't. I'm a pragmatist. I wish the political system was different. I wish we could get immigration reform. It's criminal how we treat immigrants in this country. And on and on. Sheryl Sandberg and I just talked about this. She just spoke at a high school that had 40% illegal immigrants, and they can't even report being raped because they are at fear of being deported, right? This is a human rights issue that we should be fucking livid about, and we're not. So, until we change, our system isn't going to change.
But right? I believe we can change. Don't you believe the same thing?
I do, but it takes change. I'm just a journalist. I just watch. Did you change? I'm not the guy out there who's going to be like leading that Million Man March and planning, revolution. That's not me. I'll be the journalist taking pictures of you doing it. But, so far I haven't seen that. I haven't seen it.
Well, I've seen some glimmers of it.
Yes, we
with
like
Aaron Schwartz and people like that.
Yeah, but we like talking about it. I haven't yet seen the action. And we have 18 months to the next, or how many months till the next election, next November, right? That's the time. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe they throw out everybody who voted for the NSA. I don't think they will, because they vote for the biggest idiots. I go deeper than the NSA. These guys have been doing crazy crap for years, right? We all don't believe in the Senate and the Congress. Their ratings are the lowest ever, and yeah, we keep voting them in. So until we stop voting them in, I don't believe we're going to change.
Okay, let me move on here to some audience questions. So one sort of curiosity one from Isaac Winters, who says, I want to know what ended up happening to the Google Glass picture he wore in the shower. The picture became famous, but I have heard nothing about how the device held up afterwards.
Oh, it's water resistant. We took them river rafting and got them completely wet, and they survive water pretty well. I mean, there's nothing in them. If you really look at it, there's a low grade processor chip, a TI chip. There's a little RAM chip. There's a camera chip, and there's a projector chip and a prism that's plastic, and it's pretty well sealed against water. Now, it's not perfect. If water gets in, it can corrode things and make them flaky. And actually, if you get water on the touch surface, it sometimes freaks out the machine, but you just wipe it off and it stops freaking out. These things are pretty water resistant. And when I visited Plantronics, they actually showed me how they waterproof their audio headsets, because they know you're going to get sweaty or go out in the rain or, get wet on somehow. And they actually have a micro coating that repels water that they dip these things into it as the final manufacturing. And that coating is going to be available this year, so you can do it with your own glass. And this stuff is remarkable. You can put that in a glass of water and pull it out, and it's totally dry. No water sticks to the surfaces.
Yeah, it's like nanomaterial, nano spray. Right. Yeah.
And so you can do that, and also they're going to get better at sealing the little pieces that aren't sealed yet. It just takes a little bit of sealant to do that. People are going to take apart their glass. When the costs come down, you're going to take them apart. You're going to buy, like Woz bought, 20 cell phones or 200 cell phones one time. You're going to, take them apart and rebuild them and make sure that you seal them against water. I'm not too worried about that. It won't be, for using underwater. And that's where GoPro is going to, still, be significant.
Let me ask you this. Werner Vinge has a super cool book called Rainbow's End, which is all about augmented reality with lenses. Have you read it?
I haven't. I know who he is, though.
Okay, well, we'll come back to another of his ideas a little bit later in the show, but in the meantime, let me ask you something else.
I've been interviewing a lot of augmented reality companies, and there's some really interesting ones coming that as you look at anything, your floor, it builds a 3D mesh as you look at it. And so you can play games with cars on the floor. But think about walking into a sports stadium. Each sports stadium has a fingerprint of how it is arranged. And all you would have to do is do one scan with your glass, and it would know that you're at San Francisco's AT&T Park, for instance. And it would know where you are in that park because of the fingerprint that it sees. And then it can put stuff on the field. It can put all sorts of stuff on the field, you know. It can put your players' stats right on the field next to them. Or, yeah. Anyways.
Now, let me ask you this. You said that you want to embrace the future and new technologies, but now we have sort of a crude augmentation with devices like Google Glass. But what about biotech and the coming sort of synthetic biology or genetic revolution? What do you think of that? Is that the next step of augmentation, and would you be willing to be that welcoming?
Well, it depends on who you are. I just saw some brain surgeons at a fun offsite I was at, right? And they modeled the patient's brain, and they do this for Parkinson's disease. They model their brain, and they surgically implant an electrode into the brain. And this
brain stimulation.
This one patient was shaking like this, right? And could not control his hand. And he turns on his sensor or his stimulation, and his hand goes to normal. It's remarkable stuff. Now, it costs $150,000 to do that. There are side effects because you're putting something in somebody's brain, and you only do that if you can't hold your hand steady, right? Yeah. I don't have that problem, so I'm not going to sign up for that. There's going to be.
What about having the Google Glass right inside of your head?
Not soon. Not going to come soon. We're at the Apple II stage of this Google Glass. We haven't yet seen the IBM PC version. We haven't yet seen the Macintosh, which will be, I've gone to lots of research labs because I'm writing a book called The Age of Context. I'm researching this stuff. And at SRI, where the internet was invented and HDTV was invented, they have, a pair of binoculars with two 1080p sensors and two 1080p displays. And you can tag things in 3D space. So it's for the military. So you could go up on top of the hill and you could tag a building and say, that's the building we should blow up, you know. And somebody on the other side of the valley with the same kind of binocular would see the tag in the same place. So and a jet pilot flying around would see the tag as well. So everybody sees the same tag in the same point on the same elevation, same.
Yeah, I think that's what they do now with laser marking.
Yes, but this is optical, right? This is no laser; it's just optical. Yeah. Because it knows where you're looking, it knows where you're standing, it knows where you're looking. You can do a lot of fun stuff algorithmically that way. Mm-hmm. But they put augmented reality people on the ground, and we were shaking the binoculars, and these people, these virtual actors, were on the ground. It was really amazing. It's like being in the middle of a Hollywood film, only it's a mixture of real. You know, they were running between trees and properly occluded by the trees. Wow. And they were virtual. So virtual and real, you know. Wow. In 5 years, this is going to be productized, right? And it's going to come out and be Google Glass 3.0, you know, or whatever, Apple Glass 2.0 or whatever it is, you know. And we're going to be playing paintball with each other and with virtual zombies in the street. It's going to be like the next Xbox is going to be wearables, you know? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you see the winner of the Google Glass Hackathon this weekend?
No.
It was built in one weekend, and it was a Frogger that you play by jumping. You know? Wow. And so you had to actually jump to get through the freeway. You know? Wow. I mean, now that's a simple game that was built in the 1980s, you know, and rebuilt for Google Glass. But that's what I'm saying. The Glass is a sensor platform, and it's very, very powerful. It's going to be fun to see developers come up with new ways to use the sensors there, because the sensors are quite different than your cell phone, you know. This doesn't know really where I'm aiming. It knows where the phone's being aimed, but with glass, it knows where I'm aiming. And that's a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Let me move on here, though, to your book. You just mentioned that you're working on a book called The Age of Context. What can you tell us about it?
I just started noticing that things were escaping out of the research lab and becoming real. Tad, I went back after your interview with Thad, I read his thesis project, which he wrote back in 1991. And he basically explained how Google Glass was going to work back in 1991, which it's just pretty amazing to think that that there still are visionaries amongst us that are, thinking 20 years ahead of the rest of us. Mm-hmm. But I started seeing sensors are going up exponentially. Wearable computers are going up exponentially. Databases. I every 2 weeks, it seems like I learn about a new database innovation. In fact, who was I talking to? One of the CEOs of like New Relic or a company like that said all of his infrastructure did not exist 5 years ago. In other words, these companies are now building with MongoDB and technologies that just didn't exist 5 years ago. And I totally get that. And then if you look at social network behavior, Twitter is seeing 1 billion tweets every 36 hours. In 18 months, that'll be 1 billion tweets in every 18 hours. So it's still doubling, like Moore's Law, right? And anytime you get Moore's Law kind of, behaviors in the world, it's interesting. And same thing with location. So location, social, mobile, sensors, wearable computers are all going up exponentially. And add those 5 things together, it lets you build this new kind of contextual software.
That's the context you're referring to.
Yeah, because it's going to know what we are doing, who we're doing it with, where we're doing it, and sort of our intent and how we react to things. I was wearing a galvanic skin response sensor when I was speaking at the Next Web. And the guy who invented that sensor was watching my nervous system in live.
I saw that video.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So he knew how nervous I was on stage, and he said, "Okay, you've calmed down a bit." And there was a graph.
You peaked in the beginning, and then you calmed down as it went on.
Yeah, and then he started talking to me about different things, and then we started talking about the red light district in Amsterdam, and it peaked back up. And it's like, oh, wait a second, you are inside my brain in a level, right? And we haven't even talked about going inside my brain. We're just watching my electrical signals, mm-hmm. and how excited I am about certain topics. And so you add that into the eye, where the eye is looking. You add that into where I'm aiming, where I am, who I'm doing it with, what my speech pattern is, what is my intent, what do I ask for? Man, you can know me at a fairly deep level and then assist my life. So 2 things I noticed. Last year, we were starting to see apps like Google Now that were assistive, and we were starting to see products that were highly personalized. And Plantronics talked to me about this, but so did General Motors. General Motors said, soon we're going to have a little sensor, and we're going to know you're sitting in the driver's seat, and we're going to know it's you. And we're going to be able to customize the car to you based on what you're doing in the car. If you're a passenger, it's different. It's than if you're driving, right? Mm-hmm. And it goes way beyond just moving the seat back and forth and turning on the air conditioner to the temperature you like.
Where can people and when can people get the book?
We are launching it November 7th in San Carlos, but it might be out a little bit before that. So, but November 7th is the official date.
And would it be available on Amazon?
Of course. Is there anything else? I've been going around to geeks, and asking, where did you get your last 5 books? And I haven't found anybody who answers anything but Amazon lately.
Yeah.
It's really, Amazon really has built a monopoly in this industry.
Robert, time is advancing here, so I have another 3 or 4 questions left. Let's see if we can go through them in the next 10 minutes.
Sure.
So you listed many technologies which kind of make you excited about the future and that you are welcoming and embracing wholeheartedly. Is there anything that worries you?
All technology worries me. There's always a good and there's always a bad to technology. Even like driving a car. If we were, back in Mercedes-Benz lab, back 150 years or whenever the car was invented in the late 1800s, would we have had that discussion? This thing's going to kill 37,000 people a year, which is far deeper of a problem than privacy, right? I don't know yet anybody who's been killed in America by the NSA. Maybe there is, but I haven't heard of them. But many of my friends have gotten killed in car wrecks, so that technology has a downside, and we should worry about it. I'd still worry about it. I want sensors on my car to study if somebody's coming toward me in a way that I don't see. And I've talked to Ford about that and talked to Toyota and Audi. But there's always a downside to technology. And you're seeing some of it play out. The Grok letter when she said she's closing down Grok, she said it messes with her head. The fact that she's going to be surveilled and people are going to read her email.
Yeah.
I got used to that idea 12 years ago because I knew I watched Microsoft's private email get put into the public domain because of the DOJ lawsuit. And this was before I worked at Microsoft. So I knew that it was possible that even an email that I thought was private to somebody I worked with could get leaked and put out in the public view because of a lawsuit or some other reason. So I always had, for the last 12 years, have had that belief. And that's part of why I'm so public with so much of my life. It's like, I'm going to let it all hang out anyways. And I'm going to swim in this new psychological world where I'm being surveilled, and I'm going to do it all in public anyway. So anybody can surveil me, right? Which brings a lot of good to my life. People call me up and invite me to parties, and I get invites to do really crazy things like go to on the deck of an aircraft carrier, stuff that would never have happened if I had tried to be closed and private.
Well, I feel the same way like you, and I've taken the similar decision to be as public as I can, but at the same time, I want to be respectful to people who choose otherwise, and I want to still have that possibility, and it seems that it's diminishing. It's kind of going extinct.
I think it's going to be really hard to escape, even if you don't carry a cell phone, even if you stay off the internet. My ex-father-in-law, by the way, told me when I showed him the internet back in 94, and I said, man, everybody's going to be using this thing. He's like, I will never touch a computer. And he was right. He died never touching a computer. But even his address back in 1994 was on the internet without him being on it, right? And his name was on the internet. So he was on the internet without even touching a computer. He tried to stay, and this was back in 94. So think about how much the world has progressed in terms of connecting of databases and opening up databases about things. If you're walking with somebody who's on the internet, you're on the internet too. Because it can sense that there's two people. If I have Google Glass on and I'm talking to you, it knows I'm looking at you. It can take a picture of you. It can see that there's two eyes there, and it can say, oh, we don't have that guy in the database yet. Okay. He's an unknown man, but you're sort of in the internet then, right? And it's really hard to escape. And the metadata that you're spraying off by doing these searches or calls.
Gigantic,
I don't need to see what you're talking about to know sort of who you are. I can judge you in a lot of ways without knowing the content of your email. That's like the reverse of Martin Luther King, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge you on the color of your skin. I'm going to judge you on the context of who you are. Who are you making phone calls to? If it's an Al Qaeda member, all of a sudden you get marked, right?
Well, I recently interviewed the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, Dr. Anne Kavoukian, and she says that metadata, what is called metadata, is actually much more important than the content of any specific piece of communication. But anyway, let me ask you.
Here's a good example. I live in Half Moon Bay, which is on the ocean, and every once in a while they catch a drug dealer trying to bring dope in from the ocean. If I bought a boat today, and for the next 3 weeks, all I did was drive to the middle of the ocean and drive back, I guarantee you I'm going to get searched. It's not the content of my boat that got me searched. It's the metadata about, hey, this guy's going to the middle of nowhere, driving back, and he does it on a regular pattern. That looks strange. We should check him out.
Let me ask you here, what's your take on the technological singularity?
I like half of what Singularity is about. In fact, let me see if I can show you what my screens look like here. I got Twitter. I got 40,000 people here on Twitter, right? That are, and a new tweet comes in every half a second all day long. I can tell Twitter's down before Twitter does, you know.
Wow.
Cause if it stops for more than 4 seconds, it's down. And I love this idea where I'm going to have the world's information, the world's people, the world's relationships, the world's experiences in my glass or in my eye, or
you'll be plugged in.
I'm already sort of plugged in through this. This actually makes me very happy, and I'm happy I've built that, and I have Quora set up just right, and I have Facebook set up just right. In fact, my Facebook is extraordinary, and people keep saying, "Oh, all I see is cat photos and baby photos." It's like, well, you're not following the right people, and you haven't tuned your system yet. I've done that work. I've spent thousands of hours on tuning and making sure that I see what I want to see, right? So I really like that idea where I'm going to be able to talk to my glass or my phone and say, okay, glass, you know, where's the closest sushi restaurant, or where?
But what about the idea that you may be, what about the idea that you may be getting obsolete? That
I don't think it makes, I don't think
meatbags like us maybe, I mean, look at it, machines are getting to be best in everything.
Except machines at the heart of them are still a light switch that's on and off.
For now.
Nah, there still are. Even if you put 1 trillion of those light switches together, people start believing it's alive, but it's not alive. It's a fucking light switch at the heart of it, all right? Humans are weird. And our brains are not light switches. Our brains are something else. And that gets to the other side. I don't believe that we're going to be able to download our brain. I've seen brain surgeries. Our brains, our software and our hardware are intermixed in a very complex pattern. And you are not going to be able to freeze yourself and download yourself in 100 years and come back. First of all, if you could do that, it would be, imagine coming back to life right now after being, you know, asleep for 100 years. You wouldn't know you would be like a baby in this world, and you would have to relearn everything you knew. Even driving a car, it's a very different skill than driving a horse and buggy, right? And the idea where you would have to get along with people from around the world because they can fly to you, it would be very foreign to you. It would be like you're an alien that dropped in on us, and not a very smart alien, by the way, right? So, I don't believe in that world. I don't believe in life extension. I think death happens for a reason, to clean the world out of old ideas. And yes, if you're talking about me, I'm selfish. I want to live forever, but when I stop being selfish and start thinking about the greater good and thinking about my kids, no, death happens for a reason, to get rid of old ideas and old thinking. And after having kids, you start realizing how different their brains are than yours are. So what are you going to freeze your brain, and or are you going to freeze a 3-year-old brain? Are you going to implant a 3-year-old brain and make yourself young again? It's just craziness, I think. It's a crazy path to go down. But on the other hand, make my life as extraordinary as possible, and give me all the information. Give me access to experiences, and give me the facts, give me the science, tap me right into that, so I'm not ignorant anymore and I'm not stupid. That is something worth working on, I think. And that's the Singularity. When I go to Singularity University, that's the part that I like. Go, 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 right? Make people smarter, get rid of ignorance, help them make decisions, help them see the consequences of their decision. Yes, model the world. All that makes me happy. The stuff that people talk about, life extension, making people live 150 years or 300 years, or downloading their brain. It's just, it makes me nuts.
Robert, we are here at the end of our interview. So the second last question I always ask is, where can people find more about you and your work? What's the best place?
There's this thing called Google.
All right, that answers
I
it.
could teach you how to use it. Just put my last name, Scoble, in there, and you'll find my Facebook and my Twitter and my Google Plus and my Quora and my Instagram. And
Yeah, I deliberately wanted to ask that stupid question. It's fun.
Hey, you can use Bing too, or you can use Yahoo search as well. It all works, I'm a virus on the internet,
All right, so
You can't avoid me if you use the right searches.
So, Robert, we've been talking for almost an hour today. Let me ask you this. What is the most important thing that you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from you today?
Stop resisting the future. And, I almost got in a fight with a guy who was one of the founders of the Tea Party at South by Southwest. And I realized his entire worldview was the past is sacrosanct, that we should serve the past. And my entire worldview is the future is sacrosanct. We should serve the future. Mm-hmm. And those two worldviews just don't align. And I'd far much rather live in the future than in the past. And for a whole lot of reasons, I'd rather live in a world that has gay marriage and doesn't have slavery and and lets women vote and is more thoughtful of human rights and has technologies that help us live our lives, has exoskeletons that help paraplegics walk and has glasses that help me to think and helps the blind to see. I'd rather live in that world and has a self-driving car so we don't have to worry about people getting drunk and falling asleep and killing my kids. I'd rather live in that world than in a world where we had slavery and we didn't have human rights and all that. It just drives me nuts.
Yeah,
I like living in the future.
I entirely agree with you, and it would be terribly sad and pessimistic if the best of us was in the past. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're looking backwards, you're never going to improve, really. So I couldn't agree more. And I think Stop Resisting the Future is a fantastic place to end our interview on today. Thank you very much, Robert.
Singularity.